Well, hello everyone. I hope 2025 is off to a good start for you. And how are your New Year's resolutions going? One of my goals is to prepare for the upcoming cricket season. And to help with that, I've been reading a book called The Art of Running Faster. But here's the thing, no matter how many times I read the book or nod along in agreement, nothing will change unless I actually put on my running shoes, get outside, and start training. Reading about running won't make me faster, but training will. And isn't that so often true in our spiritual lives? You know, we can read the Bible, we can highlight verses, attend Bible classes, but if we don't do what it says, if we don't train ourselves in godliness, we won't see any real difference in our characters. And Paul tells us in 1 Timothy that we need to train ourselves to be godly. You know, for physical training, he says, is of some value, but godliness has value for all things, holding promise for both the present life and the life to come. And so for our exhortation, our encouragement today, I want us to really consider what it means to train ourselves to be godly. You know, can we approach spiritual training with the same level of dedication that an Olympian would train for their sport? My main aim then is to motivate us to get some real get up and go behind our spiritual training program. And to do this, we're going to look at just three key aspects of spiritual training. The first is that small steps matter. Small steps matter. The second, we're going to consider our spiritual gym. And then the third point we're going to cover is goal setting. So small steps matter. In the world of athletics or competitive sport, small steps matter translates as progressive overload. It's the idea to grow stronger, faster, to develop and increase our stamina. You must gradually increase the intensity, the frequency, and the duration of your training. Gradual increasing. Any serious athlete will tell you that you can't lift just the same weight every day and expect to get stronger. It just won't happen. You can't plod along the same flat route every day and expect to run faster. No, athletes push themselves to the absolute limits of what they're capable of. And it's absolutely true that to improve, you have to challenge yourself to go higher, to go further, to go faster, to build that strength, that speed and resilience. And the same principle applies to our spiritual lives. Spiritual growth, we know, doesn't happen by accident. It requires us to intentionally and consistently stretch ourselves in our spiritual disciplines. And just as an athlete trains every day, we should train spiritually every day. It is a discipline. That's why we're called disciples. It's a discipline. And Paul says, do you not know that in a race all runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it. We do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. Note firstly that Paul assumes that the people who follow Jesus are in strict training, like him. He says, everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it, he says. We do it to get a crown that will last forever. Spiritual training, according to Paul, is a given for disciples. Why? Well, Paul tells us, he says it's to strike a blow for the body, to bring, in other words, to bring our human nature under control so that we can be more like Jesus. And that takes a training regime. Usain Bolt said, I trained for 4 years to run the 100 meters under 10 seconds. And I see people give up when they don't see results in a couple of months. Usain Bolt understood that reaching his goal would need time. And our spiritual growth operates on the same principle. God doesn't burden us with impossible challenges all at once. He increases our spiritual load gradually over time, according to our capacity. Small steps matter. Each challenge that we face is an opportunity for us to grow spiritually, to become less like Adam, and to become more like Jesus. Those small steps matter. In James chapter 1, we read, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. So spiritual growth, the Bible tells us, happens trial by trial. Each moment of us taking strain is an opportunity for spiritual growth. Each time we show God's glory in our trials, our spiritual muscles get a little stronger. And just like it takes an Olympian many years of dedication to win that gold medal, our spiritual growth needs time and patience, and also the mentality to endure. Because almost every training session that a top sportsman does involves pain. Those last few sets, the final 2 or 3 reps, when their body's screaming at them to stop, they embrace that moment, because in that moment, they know they're getting stronger. And so over time, as they increase the weight, as they lengthen their stride, as they run faster, jump higher, throw further, they get closer, step by step, to winning. Daily application, improving one small step at a time. James says we should count it all joy when we're tested, because it's in that crucible of trial, when you're feeling the pain, that is our opportunity to become more like Jesus. And that brings us on to the next key aspect of our training, and that's our spiritual gym. Remember that every trial is put there by God in his wisdom with the aim of developing our character. But like every Olympian, we should be preparing for those challenges. And as human beings, created with natural instincts and desires, but in the image of God, we have an ongoing choice on how we respond to each challenge. And it's crazy, isn't it? Just to sit there and wait for the next challenge to come along. And it's like Roger Federer not training between Wimbledon and the US Open. We need to have done the work beforehand. If we don't go into our spiritual gym every day, in our next difficult conversation or testing circumstance, we're more likely to give in to our natural human instincts and reaffirm that we're descended from Adam. But if we train hard, and when that moment of testing comes along, we are way more likely to respond with the fruits of the Spirit and show that we're a new creation in Jesus. And it's in our spiritual gym that we go to train ourselves to be more like Jesus. It's where we exercise our hearts and our minds, so that when that moment of stretch happens, or when we turn a corner and we come across a hill during our next park run, that we can overcome in a way that gives glory to God. Preparation is essential for every successful sports person. If you don't train for it, what do you rely on in that crucial moment in the game or in the race? A chap called Bob Knight is recognized as the most successful basketball coach in history. He coached the US basketball team, who won gold at the 1984 Olympics. And he left an inspiring quote. He said, "The will to succeed is important, but what's more important is the will to prepare." Our spiritual gym is where we go to prepare to be like Jesus. Our spiritual gym doesn't need to look like anyone else's, but it does need to exist, and we need to spend some quality time in it every day. You see, an Olympic athlete doesn't train only when they feel like it. They follow a disciplined program because they have a goal, because they're committed, because they know that the reward is worth the effort. It's in our spiritual gym that we lift the heavy weights of forgiveness, that we run the long miles of patience, and it's where we stretch ourselves out in humility. And every rep we do, every session we finish, we get a little stronger, a little more resilient, and a little more like Jesus. And when I had an honest look back at 2024, I hadn't grown spiritually. I wasn't really more patient, more humble, more loving. And so I determined to follow a spiritual training program. And the core of my program is meditation. And the Psalms are full of references to meditation. And we know that Jesus spent many quiet hours alone up in the mountain, praying and meditating. And I asked quite a few people, actually, what do you think meditation actually is? And the most I got back is that meditation is spending some quiet time thinking about the Bible or thinking about Jesus. And I would say that's the Olympic athlete equivalent of Usain Bolt going for a walk around his local park, or Thorpe, the swimmer, splashing around with his toddler in the baby pool. That's not to say that kind of thing, that kind of quiet time is bad. It is beneficial. It's good. It has its place. But knowing how David describes the intensity of his meditation, and we know Jesus did this often, every day, why should our meditation not be structured and focused and intense, especially if we wanted to yield results? So I'm going to share my program with you. And bear in mind that my program might look very different to yours, and that's okay. We aren't all marathon runners or discus throwers. To use the cricket analogy, we aren't all opening batsmen or strike bowlers, but you all share the same need to be stronger and fitter and faster and to have more stamina. We each have the same need to be more like Jesus. So your program, it might look very different. And there's also a caveat. My program's totally unproven, but it does have some science behind it. And the science says that for meditation to be effective, it needn't be a long, drawn out program. Less is more. Quality is better than quantity. And it's the same for Olympians. The book I'm reading, The Art of Running Faster, says running long distances slowly makes slow long distance runners. And it's the intensity of training. You're getting out of breath, pushing your physical capabilities. That's way better and produces results way more than long, drawn-out sessions. So I would say our daily meditation should take no more than maybe 15 to 30 minutes. And we can spread those 3 sessions out over the day. The only advice I would give you is to approach your spiritual training as if you were a coach, breaking down a training session for an Olympic athlete. And that means you have to be completely honest about the areas that you need to work on. So my first session each day involves breathing meditation. And my aim in doing this, my personal aim, is to become more patient. And I thought about God's name, Yahweh, YHWH, and it has 2 letters that are the same, the H. And the H refers to God's creative spirit or breath. And I think one of the reasons it's in twice is that to breathe, we need to inhale and exhale. There's 2 H's. And by going to a quiet place and and focusing on slow, intentional breaths. I'm aiming to train myself to feel closer to God, God whose breath sustains my life. I want to learn to listen to him, to listen to his voice, and to be patient for him to act. And I want to find a way to trust God more, to know that the wind blows where it wants. You don't know where it's coming from or where it's going to, but it's there. It's working. And I want to be able to respond to other people with a Christ-like calm and patience, even in challenging circumstances. And for each inhale and exhale, I try to say some relevant scripture in my mind, and to have a prayer going through my mind. It's something about trust and peace, and of course, patience. Okay, my second session, I call it manifestation meditation. And I've been working during this session on humility. It's the kind of humility where Jesus could say, not my will, but yours be done. So I was finding that, when I didn't get what I wanted, I'd feel quite frustrated, and I'd do my best to get my way, believing it was the right way. And often with hindsight, it wasn't. So I want to be able to accept God's will. And for this technique, I spend a few minutes just reminding myself about how absolutely incredible God is. His power, his might, his majesty, particularly in his creation, and also how much I depend on him for everything. And I use that to then visualize myself making sensible choices to accept God's will, and more importantly, to live for God and not for myself. Okay, the third session is about gratitude. It's reflecting on God's blessings to me. All those things that I get so generously from God every day. His love, his mercy, his daily care, even though I don't deserve it. And I try to let that feeling of gratitude sink into my soul so that I reflect that in the forgiveness and the love and the care that I show to others. Okay, so that's my spiritual gym. We've considered then small steps matter, and we've considered our spiritual gym. And I've shared with you more or less what my gym sessions so far look like. And the final aspect of spiritual training, vital aspect, is goal setting. Having a goal to aim for is essential. We've already said that spiritual growth doesn't happen overnight. You don't shave seconds off your 100-meter sprint time in 1 week. Progress is slow. It's easy to feel discouraged. How many times have we become like those athletes that Usain Bolt observed, the ones who gave up after only 2 months? And we obviously have a big goal. The joy that is set before us when Jesus will come back and he'll rule this world. There'll be no more war, no more pain and sorrow. But what about smaller daily goals that we can use to measure our progress? It's really in the day-to-day interactions of life where we can measure whether we're being more like Jesus or not. And I think it's important every time we go through a tough situation or we have a difficult conversation with someone that we reflect on it. Ask yourself, did I behave like Attila the Hun or Jesus Christ? Put a diary note in at the end of each month to ask yourself and maybe your nearest and dearest some questions. Have I been more patient? Have I put in enough sessions in the gym? Do you think I'm making progress and being more like Jesus? And most of all, we do need to keep Jesus in our minds. We can learn from the Usain Bolts and Roger Federers and coaches like Bob Knight. But Jesus is our spiritual champion. And we know that Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. And that didn't just happen. Jesus trained to get there. And he kept up his training all through his life. He woke up early. And most mornings, he walked into those mountains. He spent time meditating and praying, connecting to his Father, so that in every difficult situation he would face in the coming day, he would show God to the world. Our spiritual development also happens in those everyday moments of life and the way we react to the challenges that God has set for us. And it's vital that we reflect on whether we're hitting our goals and then adjust our training accordingly. And it's so important to not become discouraged. You know, Jesus is our champion. We'll never be the perfect athlete. We will stumble. We will get injured. We will let our teammates down. And how amazing it is that we have Jesus to pick us up when we fall over, to heal us when we get injured, and to make up for our shortcomings. So the main lesson, don't just read about spiritual fitness, train for it. And I'd love to hear your plans, especially if you want to take on a spiritual exercise program. And the prize is absolutely incredible. A crown of righteousness and a kingdom ruled by Jesus.